as an industry, we are experts in digitization. I'm always surprised when customers wake up thinking I've got a digitization challenge, which most customers have today. And they don't think I'll talk to the very people that create the products that can digitize these networks for me, that can scan these for me, that can integrate them. So I'm seeing greater partnerships coming from MSPs, from IT MSPs. I've got an ambition. I would like to see us as a negative contributor to carbon, actually reversing the amount of carbon that's going out into the environment, rather than just simply continuing to output it and then just paying somebody to plant trees for me.
Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Luella Fernandez, Director of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Rod Tonner-Barthett, President and CEO at Kyocera Document Solutions UK. Today we'll be discussing Kyocera's strategy post-pandemic, its views on hybrid working, and also how it's helping its channel partners progress to IT services and higher value services. So welcome to the show, Rod. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Luella.
Could we maybe kick off with you tell us a bit about yourself and your career journey and your role at Kyocera today? Yeah,
for sure. So I've been with Kyocera now officially since 2008. I say officially, my career originally started out in retail banking way back many decades ago. I did that for a few years. I then moved from that into the proximity of the office equipment market because I joined the merchant bank leasing division Schroders, where I stayed there for about 10 years through the 90s. We then sold that business to Siemens Financial Services in 2000 and ran that business for another 7 or 8 years until eventually I joined the Anodata organization and moved from the financing world actually into the office equipment world. And then over the course of the next 8 years or so with the owners of that business, we then transformed that business from a traditional print provider and dealer into a managed service provider that was providing much broader services, not only managed services around print, but also around IT. And in 2016, we were Kyocera's largest customer, and then we sold the business to Kyocera. And I had the privilege of the opportunity to run the UK and Ireland operations, and also to have an opportunity to join the board of Kyocera in Europe as well, where it gives me a very broad view over the market, not just in the UK and Ireland, but also across the rest of Europe. So I've got a bit of an interesting background insofar as I started actually from a finance perspective, moved from financing the products that we sell into actually selling the products into the dealer market, and then obviously into the channel and running that business. So a really broad span of view across both the direct and the indirect channels, which of course Kyocera represents. And having worked with, of course, a lot of the other manufacturers in my life in Anodata as well. So that's me over the course of the last 20 minutes in a nutshell, in about 2 minutes. So
yeah. Very good. No, so I think we've got quite a few different areas to cover today. So I just firstly wanted to talk about your views on hybrid work. We're obviously emerging from the pandemic now, and the return to the office is really underway in most regions and countries. How has Kyocera adjusted to hybrid work in its own organisation?
Really good question, Luella. I think people focus on the pandemic from the very negative environment that it created, and of course the human cost of it can never be underestimated. But it's done an awful lot of good, I think, for organisations generally. So I'm a really close to my heart is this need for people to be with people, and certainly talking to many business leaders, it's I think close to the heart of most organisations. So we implemented our own hybrid policy back in July last year, when we recognised that there was a lot of argument about whether offices are going to remain and whether they're going to close, and whether I'm a really firm believer that what the world now presents opportunities for both employees and organisations is this balance of being able to mix opportunities to be able to work from home right the way through to getting people back into the office. And I'm a really firm believer that it's really important to have a vibrant office environment. I really worry about organisations that are leaving their staff back out in homes and not encouraging them back into the workplace for a whole heap of reasons. I don't know, I won't mention company names, but you try phoning some of the retail financial sector in this country, and I'm getting tired of waiting on hold for an hour with a note that tells me that due to the pandemic, people are working from home and so on. The technology is there that allows the ability to be able to let staff choose where they're working from, but you need an opportunity to be able to allow staff to come back into the office and to bring teams together. I think it does well for mental health for people. I don't think working from home 100% of the time is healthy for anybody, and I've seen that a lot in our teams. I think working entirely from the office isn't the right thing to do either, because it doesn't give the flexibility to the staff. But I also feel passionately that you have to give the opportunity for staff to be able to operate in an environment where they can deliver the best level of service to customers. And I think sometimes in the debate about whether employees should come back to the office or not, we lose the customer interaction. And the fact that, I can shout across to, Fred or Flo or whoever it happens to be in the office and just go and ask them something because I've got a question from a customer, I think is really important. And certainly talking to everybody, I see it on LinkedIn a lot. You see photographs of people coming back to the office and the buzz and the real excitement that you get from bringing people back. So for us, we've had a hybrid policy in place now, as I say, since July last year. Obviously been interrupted with various events. December was the latest one. And then as soon as the ability to be able to come back into the office was released again, we were encouraging the office. We give our employees the flexibility to be able to work from home twice a week. And there's some hidden benefits of that as well, I find. So in the old days, if I was going to let the gas man come to my house, they'd probably give me a time of between 8 and 6 o'clock that they'd turn up. I'd have to take a day's holiday. These days, we just work from home on that day. I'm not losing productivity as the employer, and the employee isn't losing a day's holiday. So all of those kind of hidden benefits that come out of that flexibility, I think is really important. But, certainly, with our sales teams, we're encouraging people to get back out and get back talking to customers face to face again, because this world of Teams interaction, it's got its place, but not 100% of the time. And there is nothing better. I'm seeing a customer later this afternoon, and you spend the first half an hour catching up in a way which we don't in an electronic version, where broadly you dial on, you do your meeting, you finish, and you're done. So I'm all for bringing the people back together into an office, and that actually broadly is what we're doing across the whole of Europe as well. So we're seeing that not just here, but really around the workspace for us completely.
And I think you raised some really interesting points there, because in a lot of the research that we've run as Quo Circa, when we're looking at office workers and their perceptions of their productivity at home, a lot of them believe that they are more productive in the home environment than in the office. But I think sometimes that can be a bit misplaced, because potentially they could be working longer hours. They have less boundaries between work and home. Absolutely. And I think, like you say, there's a lot of positives in terms of going back to the office, in terms of collaboration, social interaction, creativity, and so on. But I think the transition to work from home has almost been as difficult as it is returning to the office. I think people are apprehensive about it, but like you say, it's encouraging those people to come back, and when they do come back, they realise the benefits of actually being in their team environment again.
Absolutely, and I think just two things on that, Luella. I think organisations, employers owe it to their staff to make sure that they make the return to the office pleasurable. Mm-hmm. We actually we were really conscious, particularly in the early days of the lockdown, where people had not been into an office for months. Literally months. We hosted days where people said, don't come into work, come in to just reacclimatise yourself, because the world's changed. We changed our office space. We created more collaboration areas. We took some desking out because we knew we weren't going to need it. And we've created more kind of nice areas for people to just come in and lounge and just be more sociable. So you do have to help people to come back into the environment. But we always say as well to the employees, don't underestimate the impact that you have as an individual on your colleagues. So we all have a responsibility to each other, because when I'm in and bouncing around and other people are about, I bounce off people. I don't want to be sat at home behind a desk or on my kitchen table working on my own. Maybe, I might have the dog for company or whatever, but, at the end of the day, you've got to help the employee to be able to reacclimatise to that. And I think, so there's two things there. There's the employer responsibility to help reacclimatise and overcome what can be quite a lot of anxiety. But there's also the employee responsibility to recognise their contribution to the impact that they have on other members of staff as well. So, it's bringing all of that together. And there's no playbook for this, is there? Nobody's ever experienced this before. And as business leaders, we're all working our way through this in order to try and get it right for our customers, for our employee, and for our other stakeholders.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the fact that Kyocera has changed its office environment in terms of its design. How are you helping your customers do the same, and are you seeing the impact of hybrid work for those customers in terms of how it's changing the way they work and potentially print, and what impact is that having on your customers in terms of their print volumes as well?
Yeah, that's the natural extension of this whole piece, isn't it? Because that's us talking about us as an employer. But of course, this is the same regardless as to any of our customers. And as I say, I'm having this very same conversation with, business leaders in most of our key customers. Technology has an enormous part to play in all of that. And that's where I'm incredibly excited for the opportunity that this pandemic and the impact of the pandemic has had. We're traditionally in a channel business which sells print. And of course, what's everyone been talking about? People aren't going to offices, and therefore the level of print that they're outputting, which impacts on revenues and so on, has massively declined. Now, I'm very pleased to see that returning. I think even post-pandemic, I absolutely fundamentally do not believe in a paperless office. I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I'm part of a document management organization. But I do believe in a paperless business where less paper is produced. I think we're seeing that every day, and talking to many in the channel, many have seen their revenues from print alone return to, I think probably as an average, maybe 80% of pre-pandemic level. We're certainly seeing that on our direct side of the organisation. When I go into London, I was in there on Wednesday. I was absolutely thrilled to see that the central city is really starting to buzz again. Only a few months ago, I was in the financial district walking through, and it was quite depressing because I saw lots of lights on in offices that were completely empty. Now I'm wandering through it, and I'm seeing most offices attended. We were having a drink in the evening in one of the bars. It was absolutely packed. And that's really important. So people are coming back. So technology has an enormous part to play. We are seeing people coming back because I think people want to be back in an environment, and I think people are working through what does actually hybrid working really mean. And I'm seeing, I was talking to somebody that said, we're just leaving it down to our employees. My personal view is I think that's a really bad thing to do because you create some confusion. When are people in? What's the point of me coming in on a Tuesday if all my colleagues are in on a Thursday or not around? So creating a proper structure around bringing staff back, I think, is really important. But the use of technology and then integrating that with the culture and helping staff to use that technology is really important. And then everything that welds around that ecosystem becomes critical. The biggest single discussion that we seem to be having as a managed service provider discussion with our customers is very much around cybersecurity and the threats that we are seeing. There are criminal organizations out there that are very, very smart in the way in which they are trying to infiltrate networks and systems. I'm saying to everybody, the very minimum layer of security that you should be having is multi-factor authentication. And I'm quite surprised at the number of organizations that we're engaged with that don't have even that level of security around their networks. And also then linking that to print. We have a market which the print market does something, I think, incredibly special. I think it creates relationships with customers, and which I don't necessarily see everywhere else in the kind of technology space that we predicate. And I think the opportunity for the market is therefore to be able to extend the conversations that they are having, not just about IT, but about which specialisms that they want to operate within IT. Whether that's, for example, providing Microsoft capabilities, whether that's about telephony capability. I know one or two of our partners are in the audio-visual space and looking at workspace themselves. But if you've got a really good relationship with a customer, customers increasingly don't want to have multiple suppliers to talk to around their IT ecosystem. What they want to do is to rely on smaller number of partners with greater levels of specialisms. So I think the real opportunity then for the channel itself is to really look at where does it want to specialize. Now that might be through some acquisition that they might want to make. That might be through some organic acquisition of talent and accreditations that they might want to develop in the organization. But the one thing that we're really encouraging our channel partners to do is to really look at where you can extend the level of service that you're providing with the customer and broaden the conversation. You know, I was talking with one partner only yesterday, and we had a really interesting conversation about zero trust networks and the fact that he's getting into conversations with customers about zero trust and about security. And he said, how can I maximize this opportunity? And so our dialogue has been about saying, we provide those services. So as Kyocera, what we've done, our strategy is really all around the network and all around digitization and everything that sits around that. So whether that's workflow optimization, whether that's around business analysis of the customer's workflows, and then leading into the infrastructure and then into the security around that infrastructure. The breadth of conversation that you can have with your customer is immense. And therefore, working with a partner like, for example, Kyocera, that can provide you as a channel partner with those types of services, or if you are a direct customer through our direct operations, having the ability to be able to broaden the conversations. And we do get a lot of customers that say to us, can I talk to you about this? Can I talk to you about that? And whereas historically the only conversation was just around the print, well, that can be a fairly short conversation, because many customers will say, I haven't got my staff coming in all the time. I don't need as many devices, for example. But I'll tell you what I have got a massive problem with. The way in which I'm printing stuff out or digitizing stuff and scanning stuff in, I need people to have access to those files when they're at home. I need to have security around that. Can I talk to you about that? And as an industry, we are experts in digitization. You know, we started out making machines, and I talk on behalf of the whole industry here, but pre-2000, we made stuff that didn't even connect to the network. Then we started connecting it to the network, and then we started overlaying that with really sophisticated print management software, and that expanded out to more document management, and now it's workflow management. And you know, I'm always surprised when customers wake up thinking I've got a digitization challenge, which most customers have today. And they don't think I'll talk to the very people that create the products that can digitize these networks for me, that can scan these for me, that can integrate them for me. And you mentioned about our strategy. That is at the heart of our strategy. It's about recognizing that we're building an ecosystem of an entire digitization process. If you look at the M&A, the mergers and acquisitions that we've undertaken in the UK, the Anadata acquisition back in 2016, that was actually all about creating a managed service capability around IT. And we have, you know, in our Reading headquarters here, we have a very sophisticated network operations center, NOC, which does monitoring for customers' devices. We've got a service desk here with over 65 personnel available for customers. And when customers visit us, you know, they come and see our experience center and see the nice shiny hardware. And then we take them into our NOC and service center and say, come and see the actual services that we are able to provide you with and that you will receive from us. And the really important thing for us, you receive it all from one organization. Okay, we don't split our business out and say, talk to my IT company over here or my print. You talk to us, and we own that entire conversation. And those services are available out to the channel, and they're drawing on those services and being able to offer those into their customers. So that was the Anadata acquisition. If you look further afield, in the US, I know that you interviewed my colleague Oscar a little while ago, and there was an acquisition over there which was all about business process outsourcing. So they made an acquisition of DataBank, a very large document process organization, outsourced document process organization, and we actually feed off that relationship, and we do mutual services together. And then across Europe, we've bought in Germany a number of companies. We bought AKI and Optimal Systems. In France, we bought Everteam, organizations with specific IP around document management and document solution software. Saonic was another acquisition that we made. So we're building that portfolio so that effectively we're providing not just third-party services, but we're providing our own services, our own platforms, and our own software as well. So that our service and our whole strategy is predicated around the digitization of the office environment, which actually leads me right back to your first part of the question, which is about hybrid working and how that hybrid working really interacts. Because that all goes hand in glove with it. You have to create the technology in order to be able to allow organizations to work effectively. And just to close on this point, Luella, on Friday we had Storm Eunice, I think it was. Our phones were buzzing with the business continuity team on Thursday night. Friday morning, right, we're closing our 2 core head offices. So our Hemel Hempstead office and our Reading office. We did that. We effectively shut all the offices. We kept all of our staff safe. We didn't have one moment of disruption to our customers. Why? Because we've now got the technology in place, thanks to what we've been through over the last couple of years. That 2 years ago, that would have been a massive headache and probably meant our building and our interaction with our customers would have been closed because our service desk and all our telephony would have been unmanned here, not to mention the ability to be able to dive into obtaining all of our services and everything remotely. So that to me is the whole change that we're seeing in the office environment, but a massive opportunity, I think, for channel partners to shift revenues from the traditional print revenues through to other revenue streams that customers are actually really crying out for.
Yeah, and I think you raised some really interesting points there. I think firstly, that positive from the pandemic, really demonstrates how companies like Kyocera have been able to respond very quickly to changes, like you say, with the storm and being able to stay operational, and that wouldn't have happened previously. And I think also the fact about this return to the office and the impact on print volumes, we're predicting, a similar outlook in terms of maybe return to 70 to 80% of print volumes. And I think, it's still early days to know that, but I think anecdotally, I think a lot of people, when they go back to the office, they are going back to print sometimes. And, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think, what was really interesting when you were discussing the opportunities there beyond print, and, absolutely agree that channel partners are in a really good position to understand that full digitization and digital workflow automation chain. And it's really going back to the history of office automation and the role that, printer companies and copier companies played there. And now it's evolving, and, the channel and the industry can still play a really important role in that overall workflow ecosystem. So just to really pick up again on that. So you were talking about how Kyocera has services across the board, from IT services to business process automation, workflow, and so on. Are you seeing that clients are interested in using one supplier for that? Because our research shows that I think it's about 82% of UK IT decision makers want to use a single supplier for both print and IT. And I was just curious as whether you're seeing that, if they're moving that sort of kind of independent MSPs on other areas, and they're actually sort of receptive to using Kyocera for both.
I slightly disagree with a single supplier. I think I absolutely 100% agree, Luella, that CIOs want to massively reduce down the number of suppliers that they're dealing with. And coming back to the journey that we've been on as an industry, customers are running an entire ecosystem, and that ecosystem now encapsulates everything from hybrid cloud to how they're printing to what their mobile strategy is and so on. And CIOs recognize that actually you can't get somebody that does everything because you can't be an expert in everything. What I am seeing is greater collaboration and customers being very much more amenable to be able to engage with organizations that have collaboration partners that can allow them to fulfill services, so long as somebody is managing that relationship at the front end. So the part that I absolutely 100% agree in, am I seeing a consolidation of the number of suppliers with which customers want to deal with? Absolutely. I think we're quite a long way away from having a single provider that can do absolutely everything. But am I seeing customers saying to us, we do print with you, can we talk to you about? Absolutely, we're seeing that. And for the channel in print, the first dialogue, if they're venturing into that wider conversation, is about moving their print infrastructure into the cloud, because that then starts to really unlock the dialogue with IT elements of the customer, because you're then talking about networking and how that actually operates, and then how are you going to take that infrastructure. But massive opportunity for customers to remove all of the print infrastructure from their own management and give it to the expert, give it to their print provider, and allow them to host the software that goes with it, the print queues and all of that sort of good stuff. And what we then find is that because of the nature of what happens, you get talking about the customer's firewall infrastructure, the customer security infrastructure, and that allows the conversation to broaden out. And if the partner is able to demonstrate that they have thought through the partners that they want to have or the relationships that they want to have in order to be able to fulfill those discussions. It's no longer about me knowing every answer that I'm going to have to that customer. But what becomes really critical is, what are my accreditations? If I start talking to a customer about their network, it's one thing if their print infrastructure doesn't quite work properly, it's another thing if their network goes down, right? So you become a much, much more important part of the customer's ecosystem when you're engaging with their print network through the cloud, for example, because you have to demonstrate greater competency than just simply supplying some hardware and turning up if it doesn't quite work. And then the monitoring element of that becomes really important, and so on. So stuff that the channel is already providing is really important. Customers are definitely engaging to say, can I do that? But we're also seeing engagement from MSPs, because what we're also seeing, and I think this is the potential threat if it's not addressed as an opportunity, that what you're seeing is the other MSPs in the marketplace are saying to the customer, can I talk to you about other stuff on your network? What are these IP addresses? Are they your printers? Why don't I look after those as well? And I'll put that through my service desk. And you just call me, whether you're phoning because you've got a problem with your laptop or you're phoning because you've got a problem, just put it through So I'm seeing greater partnerships coming from MSPs, from IT MSPs into the channel. So, and some of our channel partners, I think, are making great strides in building those relationships out so that you become create much more reciprocity with those partners, where you're receiving opportunities in to be able to do what I do really well, which is undertake the print infrastructure. And the conversations I'm having with those MSPs are, in the past, we've walked away from that discussion, but we're increasingly seeing we don't want to do that, because guess what's happening? Print providers are saying, why don't I talk to you about the stuff that the MSP is doing? Yes. So that's all convening, because the customer, increasingly so now, the CIO is now becoming much more responsible for the print network infrastructure, because it's an IP address. It's effectively another computer on the network, and in some cases is facing the internet with no protection to it. You know, big alarm bells, which most CIOs are now really alerted to and are considering, how do I actually make sure that I create that level of protection around it. So yeah, definitely seeing those engagements, definitely seeing customers wanting far fewer providers. And my advice to people is, be specialist, understand what you're good at. You know, there is a lot of people that say, oh, we talk about IT stuff. That's of no value to a CIO at all. You have to know what part of the network you're going to be an expert in. You have to know and have your accreditations, because if I'm a CIO, I know I do this with my own third-party providers. I want to make sure that if I'm entrusting my network to you, the very heartbeat of my organization, that you're going to look after it really well, and that you've got a competency to look after that element of my IT ecosystem.
Yeah, no, that really resonates, because even in the research I mentioned, we saw, the majority were looking at one supplier potentially, or they would consider one supplier for both print and IT, but actually they were more likely to consider a MSP, a traditional IT MSP, to manage their prints than prints, a traditional MPS provider to manage IT. And I do think that is a risk, as you say, unless the traditional partners do collaborate or partner with IT MSPs. And also your point about security and zero trust, that really does mean that you have to have strong competencies in cybersecurity. And it's a challenge for a lot of traditional partners to really make that shift unless they've got the IT expertise and training. And zero trust has become such a nebulous term in the market. Everyone's kind of using it as a hook, like a marketing hook to say, wear zero trust, but actually it's actually understanding how that actually impacts how you're authenticating your devices and your users. And as you mentioned at the beginning, multi-factor authentication is absolutely key in any zero trust strategy. So it's really interesting to hear, absolutely security is top of mind for CIOs. And I kind of wanted to shift gear a bit, because we see security absolutely as security and cloud are very closely intertwined in terms of IT priorities, but also we're seeing sustainability move higher on the agenda. And I just wanted to hear a bit more about Kyocera's commitments around sustainability, because I remember actually I started as a research analyst back in 92, 93. So it was going back, it's like 30 years, I guess. Yeah, 30 years this year. And I remember I was a print analyst and we were looking at the launch of Kyocera's EcoSys technology back then. And it was, it was a very sort of new approach in terms of sustainable printing. So I know that, you've got a very strong legacy in sustainability. So could you talk a bit about the EcoSys technology and where you're at with that at the moment?
Yeah, look, everything that we do is driven around about the sustainability of our products. It doesn't matter really where the EcoSys was the kind of the first entry really into making that a major milestone part for us. But all of our products, whether it's the EcoSys A4 range, for example, right the way through to our Task Alpha range, and right the way through, if our flagship now 150 page a minute inkjet device, which uses 70% less energy, for example, than a traditional toner-based high volume production print device. Oh, and it's soluble ink as well, right? So, everything that we do, the heart of our philosophy sits around making sure that we are making a positive contribution to the economy. And what's really interesting, I mean, we've picked the 10 United Nations sustainability goals, and we're really identifying and have honed down on six of those, and are really focusing around what we're doing with regards to transport. How do we reduce down the amount of packaging? All of the things that sit around just the product itself, because you're absolutely right. The heritage of what we do is about long life, about reducing down the number of calls in between breakdowns, so that you're reducing down the amount of traffic that is going backwards and forwards to the machine, about making sure that the amount of toner that's being laid is as light as possible, both for economic reasons and for ecological reasons. The way in which we're shipping and transporting is changing. We're just in the process at the moment, from a global perspective, from a shipping perspective, looking at the way in which we fill our 22-foot containers that the world uses. And making sure that there is no empty space in those containers, and using technology in order to fill those to the capacity. That has a massive impact, because you use fewer containers, you're using less fuel in order to be able to bring those around the world. That you've got less tyres on the road and less mileage in between deliveries and all of that sort of good stuff. So for us, the whole this whole topic has always been top of our agenda. It's driven part, and it's deeply embedded within the Kyocera philosophy, which drives us all. And we're really proud of the heritage, and we continue to really press on that. And that actually in itself also then links into the technology that we provide that revolves around print as well, because this might sound like a mad thing for a company that makes things that produce paper to say, but we've got to produce less paper. I feel very passionately about the fact that I hear a lot of sustainability conversations around offsetting. Now, to me, I think offsetting is a great way of being able to travel on a journey of reducing carbon output, right? But it's only part of a journey, and I get quite frustrated when I hear offsetting as a solution, because offsetting tells me you're still producing the same amount of output, you're still producing the same amount of carbon and waste, effectively. I think it's fine if offsetting is a journey towards getting rid of and reducing down the amount of carbon that you're actually outputting. And I think, I've gone on record as saying I've got an ambition. I would like to see us as a negative contributor to carbon, actually reversing the amount of carbon that's going out into the environment, rather than just simply continuing to output it and then just paying somebody to plant trees for me. That's great because it absorbs the carbon output and so on. But it's not the solution. So I think the journey for us is about saying, how do we, because we still want to produce stuff, but we've got to produce things in a way which is much, much more efficient, that reduces the amount of energy that is used, that the products like, for example, our Task Alpha 15000C, our production print device, is using 70% less energy to be able to run it, because it doesn't need the extremes of temperatures. So it's not drawing on as much energy. With energy prices that are moving in the way in which they're moving today, that's got to be welcomed in terms of any running costs for not just the provider that's using the device, but the end user that is probably paying the provider to use the device to create the output on it. So it's a multifaceted aspect. There isn't one silver bullet that does this. Planting a tree is part of the solution. It's not the solution. Producing goods that have much fewer moving parts in it is really important. And, visitors to our experience center will, we show them the number of parts that we have in one of our toner cartridges, for example, versus, many of our competitors' products, which could have up to 10 times the amount of parts and the amount of plastic that is contained within it. So it's about bringing all of those elements together, that, for right the way from, our wizards in Japan and the R&D center that's constantly producing this, where sustainability falls at the heart of everything that we produce. And we want to produce less. And the journey of moving ourselves into a digitized workflow environment is also about producing less. And, I'm not daft. I'm a businessman at the end of the day. And therefore, this is about moving revenues from something that is producing output, which is going to happen anyway, to helping customers to digitize, and then managing and helping customers to manage those networks and supplying the software and manufacturing the software, and doing that because the natural output of that process is much, much less. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of our philosophy around reducing down, not just simply consuming the same and just finding some clever way of being able to offset that. For me, offsetting is only a part of that journey.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think sustainability is such a complex area, and there's just covers so many, different aspects in terms of circular product life cycle models, reducing carbon emissions, biodiversity, and so on. And I think the offsetting is an interesting one, because I think, like you say, that the print industry maybe has suffered from negative perceptions around, paper having a huge environmental footprint. But actually, I think that'd be an interesting conversation to have maybe separately, is whether paper is actually more sustainable than digital technology, because paper is probably one of the most recyclable products compared to the actual technology hardware. So I think, it's all about balancing those areas. And I think we see that businesses are really looking to reduce their paper usage to address their own sustainability goals. And I guess they're looking to companies like Kyocera to deliver those types of services, so have environmental friendly products, but also services and solutions. So just on that point, actually, just very briefly, with your because obviously you're predominantly channel focused. So are you working with your channel to get them to align with your sustainability goals and missions? And maybe they could offer assessment services, look at carbon footprint of their customers, and another opportunity, I guess, for adding sort of high value services to customers who are looking to reduce that environmental impact.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is yes. Our marketing teams, we provide marketing support and a lot of resource around being able to engage with our channel partners to have those conversations and to make sure that they're bringing that front of mind. The one thing that I have definitely noticed, I'm still very much customer facing. I still enjoy going out and meeting and hearing from our customers what they see and think. And I still get very involved in pitch dialogue with customers, sometimes with the vendor themselves. And without doubt, in the same way that we were talking earlier about the kind of dialogue that you have with the CIO, customers are very interested today, and much more so, about what sustainability impact and the footprint impact is, not just of the manufacturer, but also of the partner. What are they doing in order to help to try and reduce down the amount of carbon emissions that they are doing, and so on? And I'm seeing some great examples of the channel really using various tools in order to be able to demonstrate that to their customer and to bring that to the front of the conversation. I was with a partner not too long ago. We were talking to a very large multinational, and as part of that conversation, we must have spent probably 45 minutes talking about sustainability and about 15 minutes talking about the product. To me, that was really quite notable in terms of the way in which the customer is thinking and what's important to the customer. Now, here's the really interesting thing. Most customers expect you to do this. So the idea of paying more is kind of not really on the cards. This is more about what are you doing about it within your price point. So, the old days of saying, look, do you know what, we can do this, but you're going to pay more to do all this, that, and the other. This is now becoming expected. And actually, the manufacturers and the channel partners that are not demonstrating this, and by the way, it's not limited to print either. If you're providing MSP and IT infrastructure as well, these elements are also just as much in the spotlight. So the whole point about sustainability to the organizer, because if you think about it, organizations themselves then want to be able to say, these are the sustainable partners that we utilize that help us to deliver more sustainable. So you end up with this entire supply chain of sustainability from the partners through into the customer that's selling their products and services into into their customers. So yeah, I think this is where all opportunity lies. I think, the migration from the old to the new, the move of digitization, the workflow capability that can help reduce down an organization's footprint and do less, but still producing output at the same rate in terms of the delivery of services, but better services to the customer, and easier services to the customer. Absolutely. Your point about there's no silver bullet, there's no one, there's multifaceted, is really played out through that. And I'm seeing elements of that channel really paying attention to that.
So that's been a really great conversation to understand a bit more about Kyocera's strategy. Just to end on a more light-hearted note, could you tell us a bit about your first job and any lessons you learned from it?
Oh, wow. Okay. That was a very long time ago. And I think my first job of note was my Saturday job. I used to work, I've always lived in and around the southeast of the UK. I worked at Bentall's on a Saturday, and I worked in the handyman department of all places. I had no idea what it taught me at the time, to be honest with you. But the one really thing that it did engage me on is people. There is nothing more invigorating than dealing with people. And so recognizing that actually getting the best out of people, and certainly when you move into a more senior role, engaging with people, helping people to understand what the wider picture is and so on, that's been a huge learning for me. So yeah, I think selling wallpaper and I don't know, locking nuts and all sorts of stuff when I was about 15 or 16 for a Saturday job, and just engaging with people of all walks of life for me was a great eye opener. And I look back at that time with great affection as well. So that was good fun.
Well, it's very similar to my first job. I worked in a department store at Littlewoods.
Okay, when they were, absolutely. When they were a big name on the high street, right?
Exactly, disappeared now. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks again for your time. It's been a really great conversation, and look forward to hearing more about Kyocera in the near future.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
So thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please visit quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.